Hi, I'm David
Hi.
Anderson. This is the April 16th meeting of the Timex Sinclair online user group. We have a big crowd, 20 folks today. We are joined by Chuck Durang, who, for anyone who owned a Timex Sinclair computer in the early 80s, that name should ring a bell because Chuck is the person that wrote the books that we relied upon to learn our learn how to use our computers. And Chuck has a long and interesting history in writing and publishing. He's going to talk to us about that. Kind of fell into writing these manuals in an interesting way. I thought it's an amusing story, and he'll tell us that. So I'm gonna, because Chuck's having some video problems, I am going to put his books on instead of actual Chuck. But Chuck, take it away.
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you, everybody else. This is a trip down memory lane for me, and I'm pleased to be in a room with a bunch of people who know a lot more about these computers than I do. I've been pursuing for the last umpty years a couple of whimsical careers. Just a little background. In high school, I did a lot of acting, but I lost parts in shows if they were musicals because I couldn't carry a tune. One day, I saw the Kingston Trio on the Today Show, of all places, singing Tom Dooley, and I was blown away. I went to school and I said, I've seen the future. It's wonderful. They looked at me like I had two heads. I subsequently went off to college, and the first thing I saw was a concert by the Kingston Trio at Northwestern University. And I said, wow, that looks like a fun way to make a living. Remember that this is a guy who couldn't carry a tune. I immediately went to a guitar store and bought a guitar. The action was so high, it was like a cheese slicer. I had to make it left-handed, even though they told me since I'd never played before, it wouldn't matter. But anyway, I have been doing that off and on for a long time.
Hey Chuck, real quick,
Yeah,
when did you see the Kingston Trio on the Today Show?
that was the spring of 1958.
Oh my God, it's been on that long.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all
Well,
right.
the thing is, the original Kingston Trio only lasted 2 or 3 years, I think. And then they brought in a fellow named John Stewart, not the comedian, but another one, to replace Dave Guard, who got annoyed with his two colleagues not learning to read music or anything. And he went to Australia to do things for or to sheep. And Stewart joined them. They went another few years. And then that was it. And Bob Shane, the sort of lead singer and sex symbol of the group, bought the name out from the other guys, recruited a couple of other people, and that the Kingston Trio is still playing with three new guys. All four of the originals have passed away, and but they still do the same old stuff as well as some new stuff, and they're still fun to watch. Anyway, so I still kind of stayed with music after I got to Northwestern. I actually learned how to play the guitar and eventually the banjo well enough to get paid for it within a year. You have to remember this was in the days when anybody could get paid for it. And I was in a big show, something called the WAMU show at Northwestern, which since Busby Berkeley died was then and still is probably the most major musical review made up of a bunch of different acts and so forth. And I got to be in the principal cast because they needed a banjo player. And the only other guy on the campus who could play the banjo was even worse than me. So I got to do that. I was in the principal cast along with Tony Roberts, Karen Black, a bunch of folks like that. Anne Margaret was merely a showgirl, which gives you some idea what great judges of talent they were. Anyway, so after I graduated, I spent a little time in the Army. I was an MP, but I was stateside, fought Americans in bars. And I was getting a haircut one day, and I had time left on my parking meter. And I said, I was parked in front of a agency that said, we specialize in finding jobs for Northwestern graduates. Well, I had a job at WGN TV doing, that was my major, radio, TV, and film. And but I went in. I said, I'm one of those. What do you got? And they said, do you like selling? And I said, no. And they described for me the job of a college sales rep, college traveler. Meant I went all through whatever was my territory, visiting college professors to convince them to adopt my company's books for their classes. And it was a great job because number one, I couldn't hard sell. Everybody I talked to knew more about the subject than I did, kind of like today. And it also, everybody I talked to, I learned something from. So it was a lot of fun. Eventually, I spent 20 years in the Prentice Hall organization, college textbook division. Actually, the founders were guys named Ettinger and Gerstenberg, but that wouldn't fit on the spine of a book, so they used their mother's maiden names. That's why Prentice Hall. Anyway, so at one point I fetched up as the computer science editor at a subsidiary called Winthrop Publishers in Harvard Square. And in those days, nobody had computers. I think Prentice Hall had bought 2 IBM 360s to keep in a cool room just to show off to visitors. And I don't think it did anything but maybe manage the price list. Anyway, so I was about to publish computer science textbooks. I figured that was okay. That would be a good job because I could see that computers were going to be a big deal. And so I was doing that, and I said, geez, I really ought to, if I'm going to publish this stuff, I had advisors to tell me whether the manuscripts were any good. My job was mostly to decide on what subjects I needed to find people to write books. But I said, I ought to find out how these work, but I couldn't afford a computer. And I kept seeing ads in the airline magazines as I flew around the country for the Sinclair ZX80. And I said, oh, I can afford that. And I bought one and I fiddled with it for a while. And I said, I'm doing textbooks, but I wonder if I should be doing books about this computer for other people who can only afford this computer. So I started doing that. I ran across an author named Tim Hartnell and his agent, Richard Goldner. They were both in London at the time. And I wound up talking to the Sinclair US operation, which fortunately was in Boston. I talked to their manager, Nigel Searle. Is that name familiar to any of you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, during the discussions, Nigel decided that maybe I was competent to raise and lower window shades without assistance. He said, can you rewrite our manual? I think we need that. And I looked at the manual extensively, the one that Steve Vickers wrote. And I went back to Nigel and I said, well, there's more here than taking out the extra U's. You guys over in Britain are a nation of tinkerers and you like to work at that level. Americans are going to want to know what to do step by step from the time you open the box. And Nigel said, well, can you write a manual like that? And I said, yeah, I can. I said, well, but I'm only going to do it under one requirement, that I can deliver to you the finished manuals. I just don't want a writer's fee for a manuscript, because I figured we were talking about hundreds of thousands of manuals. And he said, well, if you can beat the price we've been getting from the Howard Sams company, we'll give you the job. Because, of course, I was a publisher. I knew how to do all that. And I said, well, what is that price I have to beat? And he told me. That was a miracle. I found I could beat that price quite easily and still make enough money to pay for my daughter's wedding. And, the rest is kind of history. I learned basic programming in order to write that manual for people who were just as ignorant of it as I. And I went on to publish some more books by the aforementioned Tim Hartnell and other folks. I did when they made their deal with Timex, I, of course, did the TS-1000, the 1500, the 2068. I find that in my various moves, I've lost everything. I was going to start the Antique Computer Club, and I found all I have is a 1500 with that manual. I should use for my archives at 1000 and a 2068. If anybody wants to sell me one. Anyway, so I wound up recruiting my brother to do software manuals when they were putting out programs on the cassettes. And we were doing that for a while. I even had one of my good friends who was a basketball coach. I was after him to write a book on basketball. And he did. He wrote it on a Timex 1000. He printed it on that little bitty printer that they provided. He had, I think, a secretary at his college in the City University of New York system. Submitted that manuscript, got it published. It was a great, an excellent book, and we owe it all to the TS-1000. There was a fella I worked with at Timex named Bill Skyrme, Skyrme. Anybody recognize that name? No, I didn't think so. He was in the marketing department, and he's the guy I delivered the manuals to. There was I can't even remember the names of one of his colleagues and his supervisor, but Billy had been a programmer. And he moved into marketing one day. He was going into work on a Saturday. He and a colleague were working on some kind of a program. And his wife, as he left the house, said, now don't forget, this afternoon is our family barbecue, so be sure you're home. Oh, sure, he said. And he and his friend were working on this program, and the phone rang, and it was his wife. He said, oh my God, is it Saturday afternoon already? She said, no, it's Sunday afternoon. You've missed the whole barbecue. That's when he and I realized how you can be hypnotized by the computer and writing programs. That's when he shifted into marketing. Let's see, subsequently, the Dutchman, whose name I also forget, who was the sole owner of Timex. I think he had a shell corporation that was officially the owner, but he was a one-man show. And in January of '84, he pulled the plug. The country was full of trucks carrying Timex computers, software, everything, and he just shut it down. I stayed with Timex for a while, writing manuals for their smart watches and so forth. But basically, the jig was up on the computer part of it. And I went on to move from Winthrop to another subsidiary called Reston Publishing, another Prentice Hall subsidiary. I kind of morphed into doing professional and technical books and personal computer books. I hired a guy to take my place doing the college textbooks for that department. And here's a little interesting aside. My colleague who was doing the textbooks, he used to complain that the manuscripts he was getting were choppier than he was used to seeing. And he finally figured out why it was. They were writing them on computers on a 24-line screen instead of on a typewriter with a 70 or 80-line page. I thought that was a remarkable insight, and I don't know whether you guys have found anything of that sort if you write stuff, and anything about the hypnosis factor of working with the computer. But that's pretty much everything I know. I was 25 years in the Prentice Hall system, almost 30. Then went out and founded a couple of about 3 different small publishers, all of which were successful in their limited way. And I managed the documentation operation at something called Leading Edge Computers, which is probably the #1 PC, IBM PC clone manufacturer. I wound up with the National Fire Protection Association, publishing a couple of editions of the National Electrical Code, which every electrician in the world pretty much has to buy every 3 years at gunpoint. And I am subsequently pretty much retired. Last thing I'll recommend, if anybody wants to write this down, I've been mostly spending my time doing stuff on a website called Substack. And I have a Substack. I don't call it a page, I call it a Substack, by my name, the Chuck Durang Show. It's full of music and comedy writing and occasional other nonsense. And if you wanted to Google my name or go directly to cdurang.substack.com, I hope you'll be amused. You can subscribe for free. And if you get tired of it, you can unsubscribe also for free.
So you send out jokes.
That is everything I know, gentlemen, and most of what I only suspect. Any questions with the understanding that I probably won't know the answers?
So Chuck, I have a question, and that is, you mentioned that you bought a ZX80 and you taught yourself BASIC on that entertaining little computer?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And did you do the same thing with, the subsequent computers, the 81 and the 2068?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And again, I think I'm not even sure if I learned BASIC from Vickers' original manual or whether I picked it up elsewhere so that I could put it in the revised manuals.
Okay. Do you recall working with anybody at Timex in terms of, learning that BASIC? Did they provide you with some kind of resources to get you started? Because, there was no manual.
No, I'm not sure where I found it, but I probably figured it out. I had published a couple of college textbooks for freshmen on programming in BASIC.
Okay.
I probably learned it from there.
Okay. Very interesting. I'm just going to let you know, George Grimm is here today. I don't know if you remember George.
I remember George. Hey, George, how are you?
I'm good, Chuck.
Yeah,
I wanted to just hop in for a bit and say hi and see what you remember, because I got on here a few weeks back and they're a tough crew. So,
yeah.
And I actually joined their little consortium here, and they certainly could use some guidance on how you can do things with a ZX81 40 years later.
Well, and again, mostly what I did, boy, it's been so long, I'm not even sure what was in the manual. I did a little reviewing and looked at the reviews I got in the media and saw that, oh, there's some stuff in there that I don't remember doing. I probably used some of Vickers's stuff for appendices on the more complicated things. But basically, I just said, here's how you write some trivial programs in BASIC, and here's how you hook up the printer and the extra RAM pack. And that was about as far as I went with it, because that's about as far as A, I knew, or B, anybody wanted to know at that point.
So, Chuck, I don't know if I'm going to pin this so everybody can see it. So I just turned to theoretically a random page in the book, but it's the page about how to do the circle command and the plot and draw.
Right.
And did you come up with these examples? I mean, did you not only have to write the manual, but think of how am I going to illustrate this thing?
Oh yeah. In fact, my elder son, David, did the illustrations for the ZX81 manual. I think also for the TS1000.
Okay.
We hired a graphics firm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to do the illustrations you're looking at there, which are a little more elegant than my son's, although not much so. He did pretty good. I actually got a couple of books he wrote published in England on making 8x8 graphics, doing an alphabet and illustrations.
Wow, that's crazy. And so I'm looking at the acknowledgments page,
right?
And I won't comment on the state that you resided in or the jokes that we can make about that. But I'm curious if you remember anything about some of the folks that you thanked here, like Bill Russell from the Pennsylvania User Group, or Jackie Strasburger.
Gee, I'm afraid not. It's okay. Been, as I say, it's been so long.
Yeah.
What manual are you looking at?
This is the 2068 manual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have a copy of that. As I said, I only have a 1500 in front of me.
Okay. And
I guess we didn't have those appendices. Let's see what I got here.
You said your son did some illustration. Let's see if did he get credit for the illustrations?
Well, no, because the 2068 would have been done with the new company.
Right.
Judith, she's in. I've got her on the front page of acknowledgments on the 1500 manual. Judy Richland of Richland Design Associates in Cambridge, Mass. I'm looking at the other acknowledgments here. Yeah, I see Jackie Strasburger. Yeah, I don't remember any of those folks except obviously Vickers and the typographers who set the type. But I'm sure they all had some contributions without which I would not have been able to execute this thing at all. I'm assuming that you guys, from what little I've understood about your group,
yeah,
that you guys have gone far beyond what I did or knew about these computers, and I understood going in that these computers were a lot more capable than anybody gave them credit for. And I think you guys probably are much better at it than I am at getting them to do things.
But actually, let's circle back to that, because because you make a very good point, and yes, there's a lot of very smart people here right now. I want to let Gustavo, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, hello, good afternoon. My question is, when you write the 2068 manual, are you based in another version of the manual, or just writes from the scratch?
I think the 2068 was pretty much from scratch. Actually, I think other than the Vickers stuff that was mostly in appendices,
Cool.
all three of those manuals that I did were from scratch, because I had to start with a different concept than what he was doing. I was actually starting to work on their latest computer when the Dutchman pulled the plug. Which one was that? What was the one?
Fred Olson, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, no.
Go
Yes,
ahead.
sorry. My question is because some of the commands are not full documented on the manual, especially the peripheral use basic commands. For example, the open, close, and also the reset. You know why it's not full documented? The information does not exist at the time that the manual was printed, or you don't have the source of those commands?
I couldn't tell you for sure. My guess is that with all three of those manuals, I was working from the concept of starting at zero and going as far as I could with the basic language. And obviously none of the programs in those computers were of any great value. So there were some commands I probably just ignored altogether. Unless they wound up in the appendices, I wouldn't have bothered with them.
Hey, Jeff.
Oh,
thank you.
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, Chuck. I've done some technical writing in my past, and I was interested in the mechanics of how you went about writing the text, getting it integrated and laid out on the page. I mean, for instance, did you use a word processor to do all the text? And then I imagine you turned the layout over to the graphics design company. So I was wondering if you could just give us an insight into that.
I've done over the years, especially under the companies I started and ran, I've done a lot of typesetting myself. And often I did it only pretty much in word processors. I used to spend a lot of time with WordStar. I'm willing to bet that I wrote those first manuals in WordStar, including pretty much the formatting. I'm trying to think now. I did use typesetters, and I probably worked with a typesetter to get the layout of each of those manuals. Again, I'm looking at the 1500 with a wide column of text and a narrow column of illustrations. I think that was, I'm guessing I wrote them. I wrote the words. I initially hired my son to do the illustrations. I may have suggested what things I wanted illustrated. And then I may very well have turned it over to a typesetter to do the design.
So pretty small operation.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. Okay.
Well, I knew I'd like the manual the moment I saw the bird with the dealy boppers on its head. So.
Alan, you there?
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, that's great, because the first time I tried this meeting, it wasn't working out too great, but everything's great. So Chuck, it's such a pleasure for me to see you here. And I have to say, I did learn as a child. I did pick up, my first computer was the ZX81, so I did read that manual, and that was the Steve Vickers one. But the second computer was the 2068. So that was your manual, and it was I found it a pleasure to read. So my main question is, the 2068 underwent a different path from the Spectrum, and that seemed to be decided fairly late, and that was in January of 1983. So I'm wondering, did they give you a machine to use in order for you to write the manual, or did they just send you a description of the new hardware and the new commands that were different from the Spectrum?
I'm not certain I remember. I do remember that when I was documenting a number of Timex's watches, they sent me a breadboard, maybe a 4 by 2 foot with components on it, including the little bitty screen that would eventually be in the watch, but it wasn't a finished watch. It wasn't shrunk down to that size. I don't remember. I think the Spectrum, I think they sent me the British version, and I worked from that. I honestly, it could have been the breadboard, or it could have been the original computer.
Chuck, do you remember?
Yeah, because it.
Oh, go ahead.
It does. I'm sorry. It does seem like Timex didn't have something that was working until quite late. So I think you would have had to write the manual before a working machine was even available. So do you remember? So you remember it as having an original British Spectrum instead of some kind of 2068 prototype?
Yeah, now I'm getting a little confused here. Is the Spectrum the one that turned into the 2068, or is the Spectrum the one that never quite made it to the US?
The former. It turned into the 2068.
Okay, well then that's probably what I worked from.
Did you get notes from them about the sound command, for example, or the stick command? Like those are the new commands that were added that wouldn't be present on the Spectrum.
I'm afraid once again, the answer to that question is lost in the mists of antiquity. I would guess that they did not give me those things, that those things are either, if they're in the 2068 manual, which since I don't have one in front of me, I don't remember, we would have added them later.
Chuck, do you recall when you started writing the manual? What year?
Actually, I don't know. I think this was a very compressed time frame.
Yeah.
I started with the ZX81 in probably 1981, if not 82. Almost immediately thereafter came the TS1000. Very soon after that, the 1500. It would have been no later than 1983 for the 2068 manual, given that they shut it down in January of '84.
Right, and it had to ship. It had to ship in the package, to be in stores by November. Yeah. So I've put the page up for the stick command.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that.
Not too much. I see a bunch of stuff, but I can't read it.
Okay. And it's, actually this is, I can tell just based on how you're referring to it, you say the TS2000, which sort of dates it to a specific point in time before they settled on calling it the 2068.
Yeah.
There was a point where there was going to be maybe 2 computers, and took them a while to settle on the actual name. Yeah. Okay.
I still don't even remember why they called it the 2068.
Well, Danny Ross was on with us a month or so ago, and the apocryphal story was that at some meeting he just called it that, and people said to him, "No, wait, that's not what it's called," and he said, "Yeah, but it sounds good, so let's go with it." And then he confirmed that story.
That's as good an answer as any. Yeah,
right.
This
is how your computer gets named.
Oh, that's funny.
I believe they added the amount of RAM and ROM together, and that equals 68.
That
50,
that
well,
also makes sense. Yeah.
well, no, so that was one of the potential names was the 2072, which was the sum of 24K plus 48K.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was one of the potential names for the computer. Chuck, can you tell us a banjo joke? Because I have friends who are banjo players, and they always have the best banjo jokes.
Oh, do I know banjo jokes?
See,
Let's
they all know
see.
them.
Do you know the definition of perfect pitch?
When you throw the banjo in the dumpster and it doesn't hit anything on the way in.
Pretty close. The way I heard it is it's the ability to throw a banjo down a well without hitting any of the accordions already down there.
Oh, that's a good one.
Probably my very favorite is, do you know the difference between a podiatrist and a banjo player?
Oh, I've not heard this one.
Well, the answer is a podiatrist bucks up the feet. You can.
All right, I got one for you. How do you know that a banjo player is at the front door?
He's got a pizza parlor sign on his car.
Because he keeps knocking and it keeps speeding up.
Oh, yes, I can see that. What else? Oh God, there's a million of them.
There are a million of them. Yes.
How do you keep two banjo players in time with each other? Shoot one of them.
Okay, I have to ask because I don't know the background here. Why are there banjo jokes?
Because the banjo is it's a folk instrument, and it has a very distinctive sound that some people find challenging.
I like to feel it's that all the guitar players are jealous of those of us who can play the banjo.
Well, there's that. There's that.
There is, by the way, here's another thing to write down if you care. I once gave early finger picking lessons to a gentleman, a young man out in Fargo, who's now named Dakota Dave Hull. Dakota Dave is now possibly the best folk guitarist in the world since Chet Atkins died. And he just took up the guitar banjo, which is basically something constructed like a banjo, but with 6 strings like a guitar. I have ragged on him unmercifully about the fact that his banjo has the wrong number of strings, but he just published a CD, an album of all songs on the guitar banjo. And I have to admit, he's over in the Far East doing concerts as we speak. But I sent him an email and said, I hereby apologize for saying that your banjo has the wrong number of strings. I also apologize for what I didn't say, but was thinking that it's just guitar stuff played on something with a more of a tinkling and clanking sound. But it turns out that what he has got on that album is really neat stuff. It doesn't sound much like a guitar. So anyway, if anybody has any interest in seeing what a guitar banjo sounds like, look up Dakota Dave Hull.
Cool. Well, Chuck, thank you for joining us. I promised you would tell some amusing stories, and you told some amusing stories. I saw folks laughing when you were talking.
Good. I hope, since, as I said, just as Dakota Dave has far outstripped his teacher in playing the guitar, I think most of the attendees, if not all of them, in this group have far more knowledge about these funny little computers than I ever had. I thank you so much for having me in. I hope I told some amusing stories because I wasn't able to provide too much insight on the innards.
Well, it's the context that's really interesting. the part that you brought was interesting. It's all part of building that full picture.
Well, good. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I certainly did. In fact, as I often say at the end of a performance on stage, if you enjoyed this presentation half as much as I enjoyed giving it, well, then I had twice as good a time as you.
Hey, Chuck.
Well, I had a question.
Go ahead.
If I can say. Well, you don't know me. I am Portuguese. I had computers made by Timex of Portugal, a subsidiary of Timex. I've been checking because I have here like this. I don't know if you can read
Portuguese,
it because it's in Portuguese.
1000 manual.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's 1000 manual. But this manual doesn't mention you in here. It mentions Steve Wickens and the person who translated it. I have also the American one.
Right.
I have the American one where you are mentioned right here.
Right.
I have the Portuguese one that's different. It's basically 1000 manual with some pages just describing the 1500s.
Uh-huh.
I have the American one.
Right.
I have the Portuguese one. The Portuguese one mentions you. So my question would be, if you were contacted by Timex of Portugal, so they can use the Timex manual in Portuguese, because amazingly, this one, it has your name in it.
Well, there is in publishing, when you write something and own the copyright, of course, you would have to be consulted about any translation. But I did these as a, quote, work for hire, unquote, which meant that Sinclair and then Timex owned the copyrights. They made arrangements like that without consulting me. I'd probably like to sue somebody about putting Steve's name on the one manual instead of mine. But of course, without seeing the manual, I couldn't tell you. Maybe they use his manual, and who knows?
I'm pretty sure it's very similar to the 1000 American version.
Okay. Well, in that case, we'll be in court about this.
I don't know. This is the same page David was showing.
It's the 2016 manual.
Oh, yeah.
No, this one.
Oh, the 2048. Okay.
It's basically the same manual. It's basically the same manual, but without like stick sounds, comments.
Yeah.
Chuck, you did mention, oh, go ahead, Paul.
I have a question. Does anybody know the copyright date that Howard Sams had on the tech manual or the drawings that they had for the 2068?
Gee, I don't know. I wasn't even aware they had published a book on the 2068.
There was a rumor that after the 87 show, they decided to support the 2068.
Huh.
Because they saw the crowd.
Yeah, yeah.
So they did a photo fax for the 2068.
Well, they still did their photo fax, and that was a whole different track from the from the in the box manuals.
So, and I wondered if there was anybody knew the copyright date to verify that rumor.
Not
or to dispute
anybody
it.
else? Nope, nobody knows.
Well, I will add this as far as there was enough information in the supplied with the computer manuals that if you dug deep, there was a lot of meat that even a newbie could understand especially compared to a lot of other technical manuals of the time.
Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And I came from a tech industry, and our manuals and documentation might be a yard deep, but very detailed and very, you had to know stuff before you could get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chuck, I'm going to let Adam jump in a second, but there was a review, I think it was of the 2068, or it might have been the 1000, that specifically praised your manual, and said, in an industry where manuals are not great, this is an actually good manual.
Well, I sent you a couple of sheets, David, where I pasted up a collage of snippets from reviews. I was very proud of those because being in the computer industry, at least the publishing end of it, I, spent a lot of time in the press, and I saw that almost never was a manual mentioned. And if it was to hold forth on how terrible it was. And so since I had that collection of praise, I was very proud of that and very happy to see it.
Well, and clearly it worked for us. Adam?
Hey, how's it going? My name is Adam. I'm kind of a newbie to the ZX81 and the Timex 1000, et cetera, but I dig them, and I want to say a couple things. First off, Kingston Trio, Mexican Jail is an awesome song. So you've got great taste in music. So I would love to hear, not here, but like some background about you seeing them live, but not here, not appropriate. You mentioned Tim Hartnell, and he died kind of young. I was wondering if you could tell us anything about him and some of his work that you might have worked with him on.
Yeah, I had him do a book or two for Winthrop when I was just moving that list into personal computers. Tim was very young when I knew him. He died at 40 of cancer, which was really a terrible loss. He was a very nice fella and a very, he was good at explaining the basics. That's what I liked about him. I had, I spent some time in London with Tim and his agent. I mentioned, I think his name, Richard Gollner. I haven't been able to find Richard. I think he's probably left us too, although his company, Radala and Associates, still seems to be in business. But Tim wrote a number of books on personal computing. He probably did more than a couple for me, but he also wrote for other publishers as well. And yeah, I can't tell you anymore. I kind of lost track of him when I got out of the Timex Sinclair publishing end of it. And I only recently learned how young he had died.
Well, thank you. I also was wondering if you could tell me how long it actually took you from start to finish to do your upgrade on the 1000 manual and also the 2068 manual. Like, was it 2 months, 5 months, 8 months?
I'm guessing we're looking at, well, I'm trying to think back now. To do the original American ZX81 manual, and then to morph that into the 1000 and the 1500 and then the 2068, I'd say we're not looking at more than 5 to 8 months window.
Thank you.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah,
Sure.
my question is kind of related to what Adam was talking about, and that is, I'm wondering what kind of constraints you're under. So you kind of, it sounds like you were actually arranging for the actual publication of the manual. Were you delivering the manuals to Timex and then they put it together with the computer, and that's how it went? Or did Timex itself publish these manuals?
No, as I related earlier, I only agreed to do the original manual, and I think, wait a minute, let me back up. I delivered finished manuals to Sinclair. I arranged for the typesetting and the graphics and the printing and binding and so forth. I am guessing, well, I'm looking at my 1500 manual, and the structure with the comb binding is similar to what I did with my ZX81 manual, but I'm pretty sure I remember making a big pile of money on the ZX81 manual. I do not recall making a big pile of money on the Timex versions. Therefore, I'm assuming it just delivered them a manuscript and they took it from there. Well, not a manuscript. I delivered them the typeset version with the graphics and so forth, but I think they arranged for the printing. I didn't make any money on that.
I find it, it's a little strange to me that you were dealing with Nigel Searle at Sinclair, and because the ZX81 was using the Steve Vickers manual, even in the United States. So it seems to me like your manual should have been going to Timex, but you were dealing with Sinclair.
Oh, I think when I started doing the Timex Sinclair versions, I was dealing with Timex. I was dealing with Nigel just because he asked me, can you improve the ZX81 manual? And that's what I did. And then Timex came along and they said, well, this looks pretty good. Just massage it a little and we'll take it.
So did you not get credited in the ZX81 manual?
I was. Yeah. The original manual is Steve Vickers.
Yeah.
The one I did, I think, had my name on it.
Okay.
Probably I made sure when I had the typeset that it had my name on it.
That's right, because you said you delivered them a finished product, the actual manual itself.
Which edition would that have been? Does anybody know?
I'm not sorry. To my knowledge, there was only one edition.
Well, I have the first edition of the ZX81 manual right next to me, and your name isn't in it, but it's also the first edition.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, now if it's the first edition of the British version, that would have been the one Stephen Vickers wrote. Okay, that would not
be the U.S. version. I have first edition, just has Vickers' name.
Gee,
yeah, my understanding was Sinclair only used the Steve Vickers manual, even in the ZX81s they sold in the US. So I'm a little confused about having a second version of the ZX81 manual that was written by you.
Well, I cashed a large check for delivering those manuals, so I'm sure.
But did the check clear?
I mean, it's definitely a U.S. version.
Yeah, well, that's odd. I don't have an answer to that because the U.S. version with my words in it should have had my name on it, and I'm pretty sure I recall that it did. If it's the more technical type manual that Vickers wrote, that would have come into this country as a first edition when they started selling those computers. It was only later that Nigel asked me to do a new one. But I know they sent me like $125,000 when I delivered a pile of manuals. Of course, I had to pay 100,000 of it to the printer, so I didn't get to keep much. But as I say, enough to underwrite my daughter's wedding.
Wow.
Chuck.
Yep.
Not only did you write the manuals, but didn't you write all the instructions for all the cassettes also?
I did, and in some cases I subcontracted that work to my brother, who was a writer and he taught creative writing at Columbia College in Chicago. I brought him east, not knowing whether he could do technical writing. He did what he did, but fortunately he was able to do that. He probably wrote more of the software manuals than I did, although I did a number of them.
Yeah, how did you do that? I can remember you, but not your brother, but I do remember you had your brother involved. Actually had to sit with one of my people, I thought, and just, he described and they wrote. I can't remember how that was done. I mean,
yeah, I don't think my brother ever visited Timex. I was in there and I would talk to Billy Skirm and another young man whose name I can't remember, who worked with Billy. And then there was a third man who was their supervisor, whose name I also forget, and who I also worked for when they went out of the computer business and into, you know, I wound up writing a bunch of watch manuals for them.
that might have been Lou Gailey. Does that ring a bell? Lou
Say
Gailey?
again?
Lou Gailey? Lou Gailey?
No.
Oh, okay.
Slightly longer name than that.
The breadboard you were referring to, that was for the data link watch. I didn't know you were involved with that, so that's good. That was the data link watch that you must have worked on after this computer company went under.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of watches that they bought from Casio that they wanted me to rewrite the manuals, which I did. I basically redid them from the ground up. And I worked from the Casio watches on those, but all the ones that were new Timex created products, I was working from a breadboard. The one I most remember, I don't remember which watch it was, but I got it, you know how I should say you guys, did the watch manuals on a giant sheet of paper folded 7 times into a little wad. And there was this one watch where I had to, I didn't rewrite it. I just had to reformat it for some reason. And what I remember is it was in 8 different languages. Now I was able to operate in English, in French, in Spanish, sort of in German, but I was really in trouble with the Greek version. But I still was able to figure out which parts went where when I was doing that.
Very cool. Well, Chuck, if you stick around, you'll get to hear smarter people than some of us talk about interesting things.
David, I thought you were going to say smarter people than you. I was like, what?
Some of you guys are you know, way sharper than I am. A lot of you guys are.
As I said before, I trust that you're all pretty sharper than I am as well.
Well, you know, none of us taught well, not none. There are a small number of folks who taught ourselves BASIC in on the ZX80, and that would have been a pretty challenging experience. So, you know, kudos to you for doing that.
Well, when I was publishing at Winthrop, I had a gentleman called a series advisor who was my expert to tell me whether manuscripts were any good. I think he's still alive, although he's on in years, a fellow named Gerald Weinberg, who was mostly an expert in human factors in computer science, which is an interesting concept. But I remember when I first was talking to Jerry, I was flabbergasted that he could read a COBOL program, you know, without putting it into a computer and seeing what it did. Even in BASIC, eventually I got to where I could understand a BASIC program without typing it in and seeing what came on the screen. But COBOL and Fortran and all that stuff, well, it turns out that Jerry was one of these programmers who glows in the dark and could actually, like I say, read COBOL and understand it. He also invented a concept called debugging. Now, you're familiar with the concept of debugging to fix what's wrong with a program.
Yeah.
Jerry invented the concept of debugging, which is to put some errors into a program on purpose to see if the person doing the debugging would find them. And if he didn't find them, you couldn't trust the fact that he didn't find any others as well. So there's a human factor for you.
Hey, Alan, you have a question?
Yeah, just one last question about the constraints you're writing these manuals under. So I imagine there was ideas about how much the manual would cost, how big it was, how much it would weigh, how many pages it had. And maybe, I don't know if you remember any stories about staying up until 4 o'clock in the morning to try to get things finished by the deadline or anything like that. Were there any of those sorts of constraints you were working under?
I tend to write pretty fast, so I did not have any deadline problems. I wrote the manuals, and then I had Sinclair or Timex, as the case may be, review them and tell me if there was anything that needed to be corrected. As far as the size of the manuals, no, I think as long as I could beat the price they were paying Howard Sams, they were happy. They never gave me any weight in the box requirements. I probably told them how big the manual was going to be, and I honestly don't remember any discussions of weight, but they might have wanted to know that, unless they could just figure it out from the page count. But no, I had pretty much free reign. I did what I thought was appropriate. I sent it to them. They said whoopee, and in Timex's case, sent it off to a printer. In Sinclair's case, just sent it back to me, say, go ahead and print them. I'm sure in both cases there were some, how about this, or this isn't quite right, or whatever. But for the most part, it was mostly in my shop.
Very cool. If anybody doesn't have any other questions,
I just had.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I just had one little to add on to the Kingston Trio train there. That's what I was supposed to say.
What's that?
You want to show that again? Oh my gosh.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I have a 10 CD set of the Dave Guard Kingston Trio. I have a 10 CD set of the John Stewart Kingston Trio. I have any number of reel-to-reel and cassette and CD versions. I probably, in all of these locations, have everything they ever recorded. I have done covers of many and many of their songs. Yeah, they were my inspiration when it came to the guitar and the banjo. I have a long neck banjo, which is a kind the trio played, and the kind that Pete Seeger played, not one of the little short ones that you'll see in a jazz band. I basically tried to do what they did. I eventually kind of branched out, and I do a lot of stuff that isn't, Kingston Trio inspired. I'm no longer a quote folk singer. I am a quote singer-songwriter. But for the most part, that's where I started, and that's where my heart still is. The Kingston Trio, Bob Gibson, the Limelighters, Chad Mitchell Trio, Gordon Lightfoot, coming down toward the present.
Very cool. Y'all have been active on the email list doing projects for the past couple of weeks. And I want to ask two folks to talk about that. I'm going to start with Tim Swenson, who took up the mantle of organizer of documenting how to install and use emulators across multiple platforms, and then handed out assignments. I think that's a fair assessment, Tim.
Yeah, basically, I volunteered a couple of people. Can you, Dave? Can you bring up the document at all? If you've got a copy.
Yeah, give me just a sec. You riff and I'll find it.
So basically, there was a query from somebody saying, or people having problems, with one or two people having problems just installing the emulators, not knowing how to use them. So someone suggested having a document. So the idea of the document is going to say, okay, if you have Linux, here's an emulator, here's the the cookie cookbook procedures for installing the emulator, and here's how to get it running, and just at least get into it and get a simple program going. Same thing for there's basically we have ZSARX for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS for does 2068. Warayevo is a DOS program that does 2068. And then 81 is a Windows program that does 2068. A lot of the Spectrum members will not touch 2068, so we're kind of limited. So I've got documentation for Warayevo with DOS, ZSARX with Linux. I've kind of volunteered a couple of David to do Windows. And then to help them, once they do this, we have ZMake base. It's been modified to work for the 2068. I've ported it to DOS. I've compiled it for 64-bit Linux. We might need someone to compile it for Raspberry Pi and for Windows, and then put those all into a single zip and give that to folks. If you scroll up a bit, so I'm using Scribus to do this instead of regular word processor because you have better control over the graphics. So you see up there's some screenshots. I'm not sure how much I'll embed the screenshots into the text document, but I like having a nice cover page. So there's the Warayevo, and here's how it looks like for the startup, and then how you actually go and select a file. I'm changing how the programming tools work until just going to be like, here's ZMake base. I'm not going to do Z80 assembly because I couldn't find a good one for DOS that worked with the Spectrum. As far as how I've got TASM, I know how to use it with the ZX81, but I have no idea how to use it with the 2068 or the Spectrum. Because if it works with the Spectrum, it'll work with the 2068. So I think we're just going to do ZMake base and just describe it because it works the same on all platforms. And those are just simple screenshots of the emulators. Once I get a screenshot of 81, I can add it to this also. So at least it makes it a little more nicer presentation. If you scroll down one page, I think this should be there. There's everything's released with a Creative Commons license. I haven't put a copyright. I'll mention everyone who's added contributions to it. So initially it'll be hosted off of my website, Adam. And then David can go put it anywhere else he needs to go.
Yeah, we should put it up on archive, and I'll find a place. Right. I'll find a place actually on my site to link to both your website and the archive.
Yeah. Right. So, and then it'll come with a downloadable. We'll have the ZMake base in all the different. So I'm going to probably like ZMake base _Linux _exe or just whatever. So you just change it to basically copy the one you need to your OS, and you'll get up and going. I did mention a bit about DOSBox and the fact that by default it traps the mouse. So if you're in DOSBox, you're like, where did my mouse go? You won't leave DOSBox. So I put a little note on how to fix that because that's a key stumbling block, I think, for someone running DOSBox. And DOSBox does run from Windows, Linux, Mac OS. So anybody can use DOSBox and use Warayevo. Warayevo is actually a really nice emulator, very powerful, but again, it is DOS only. There's also a feature with DOSBox I want to mention. Well, that's why I'm putting ZMake base to DOS is once you start up DOSBox, if you go and try and edit any files that are controlled by DOSBox in the directory, DOSBox will not notice it. So you can't go out to Linux or your host OS, edit your files, and then hopefully DOSBox will notice the edit and make it available for your emulator. it just won't notice it at all. So that's why keeping ZMake base as a DOS application, you stay within DOS, do all your edits, get into your emulator. Oh, I made a problem. So then you go back out. What was the thing?
Yeah, I ran into that problem. If you go back to my post on getting the microdrives in 2068 mode in Warievo, I think I mentioned that a little bit. So that when you had if you try to bring in a microdrive image, yeah, you ran into that problem.
So Adam, your question, so you're running an emulator in an emulator, what's the advantage? The advantage is you've got one more emulator to use that supports the 2068, and Warievo is I think a fairly powerful emulator. So with right now for Linux, you only have ZSARX, which isn't bad, but the documentation sucks. And I've addressed that to the developer. And he goes, "Who needs documentation? Just use it." So
Same.
I think they all kind of suck.
I actually looked at Warievo. It's 1 second.
Maybe it's just, I haven't really looked at it very much.
The Warievo documentation is this thick.
Oh my gosh.
I printed it out.
Oh, okay.
And it's double-sided, so it's fairly comprehensive.
I suggest if you're going to use DOSBox, just zip up an entire virtual drive and have all the configuration ready. Then all you have to do is unzip it and it's ready to go and configured. That's what I do with my DOSBox apps if I distribute it to someone else.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's if you buy like Doom on Steam and things like that. That's exactly what they do. They bundle it with DOSBox and they call that. And the beauty is if any OS that has DOSBox should be able to just use that drive image as well. That's the real advantage.
I see what you're getting at. I don't know, because those DOSBox does do virtual drives?
Well, what it does is it allows you to map a directory as a drive. So, so you just do it, and then in the configuration, the only thing you would have to change is based off your OS is where that base drive is, and it might even work with relative paths. If it does that, then you wouldn't have to change anything at all.
Well, you got to edit the config file, which is in a different location for different environments, and then for Warievo.
Well, you can set up. I believe there's a command line option where you can force a configuration. So you'd still need some kind of launcher, but
right. So it's like the idea here is just to give instructions like go out, get your own DOSBox, go get your own copy of Warievo. We're just going to give you the instructions of how to link those two together. I don't want to get in the business of, oh, my DOSBox isn't working. Hey, Tim, no. We're just, we don't own DOSBox.
Well, ideally, if it's working, it continues to work even if it's an old version. So,
right. So, because we don't get into the business of supporting everything. Then they can say like, well, I'm having this problem with Linux. I'm like, no, we're not really gonna, So
you're not gonna put your phone number in the documentation?
Say again, Adam?
You're not gonna put your phone number in the documentation?
Well, luckily, no.
Well, at $100 an hour, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'll pay me up front first. I've done something like that once before and never got paid. So up front only.
So Tim, you mentioned a bunch, but I think you left Fuse off the list, and Fuse is
actually, you're right. So I'm hoping. So I think I kind of volunteered Ryan to do Fuse.
For the Pi.
I couldn't get Fuse to work at all with the 2068.
Well,
I kept thinking it was a Spectrum. So
okay.
But I didn't want to, if Ryan wants to
for Linux.
Okay. I use Fuse on the Mac.
So
I use Fuse on the PC, so if someone needs help.
I was going to send you what I have, and then maybe, David, you can see what you want to do with it for Windows or the Mac, rather.
Mac, yeah. I think it's available for Windows too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of getting someone doing it, writing down what they did, and we can add to the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
And then also make sure it's usable. So I found Fuse runs incredibly small on the screen.
Yes.
So there's got to, we got to fix that. We got to tell people how
Yeah,
to.
you can.
yeah,
You can
make
have
it
an
larger.
option to increase the screen size. It's got like some default, like double and triple size.
Yep.
yeah, I've
And the
shown
triple
that
size
in
is
what I
almost
have
full screen.
of how to do
But
that.
our user guide should address that. Hey, the
Yeah,
default doesn't work
addressed it.
right. Do this. Yeah. So again, I want it to be as much cookie cutter, because the one gentleman that was emailing, I'm not sure his English was terribly great, but he didn't come across as the brightest bulb on the tree. So I want to make sure the documentation is for that dim bulb. No, we're not pointing to you, Adam.
Talk about Adam.
I saw Adam.
Who else?
Adam's our test case.
Fine, I'll be your test case. That's fine.
Yeah.
When I have trouble, I'll just call up Brian. He'll come on over.
What's the phraseology? Nothing is idiot proof because idiots are so ingenious.
Yes, we are.
So, and having been in tech support for years, I understand there's various levels of knowledge. Luckily, the people I deal with are usually fairly knowledgeable, but I've run across a couple that need a lot more help. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Been there.
I just sent you guys what I had so far.
Okay, cool. So Tim, give us a due date.
Tomorrow?
This is a homework assignment. No, not tomorrow. That's too soon.
I know. So as soon as you can, that's my best thing. I only started working on this because someone mentioned it. I had like 3 or 4 different projects already on my plate. And then someone mentioned this document. I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. And took the inspiration, and because I was motivated, started working on it, put the other stuff to the side, and then I was able to get that document out. I think the first one I sent you was pure Word, open office.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one I then put it into Scribus. Then I went back and reworked the original document. Just for those who know, Scribus is an open source desktop publishing tool, just like OpenOffice is. So I can always release the whole document if someone wants as a Scribus, zip up the original document and Scribus and the whole bit. And make
Tim,
it
you write your newsletter in Scribus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the advantage is you can use Word, but you can't maneuver the pictures and the images exactly where you want them in Word. It's not terribly easy. And if you want to put text over an image, I don't think that's possible in Word. So with Scribus, I found you can do columns. You can put a text frame over a graphics frame. You can dim out the background image so it becomes more dull. So you can do a lot more with Scribus, and it's open source. I try and use all open source tools. Before doing the Sinclair e-zines, I did an e-zine on Bay Area ska music where I really cut my teeth back in 2006, learning all about how to do Scribus. Even went out and bought the Scribus book.
Oh my gosh.
Which was, I think I had to go to England to get that.
Yeah.
So
cool. All right. Thank you, Tim. We will get our homework assignments done as quickly as possible. Adam, you want to tell us a little bit about the Dan Tanberg saga?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's good to be on another meeting on a Sunday afternoon. So back in, I think it was February or March, there was some talk about some various New Mexico user groups, and that was talked about because Carl was in it. And I started looking on David's site. He, if anyone doesn't know, David has a really good website. If you haven't visited it before, it's timexsinclair.com. And I don't remember how I searched it, but I think he might have already separated it out. Is that right, David? Like you had it like groups and companies set out by state?
Page for user groups, and it's broken out by state.
Yeah. So I found 6 or 7 companies that were in New Mexico, and one of them, I think 2 of them, were here in Albuquerque. And I was able to find the address of Dan Tanberg, who actually is still living in the same house as he was in 1982. And so I wrote him a letter because I felt kind of funny just calling him. And he got the letter like 2 days later and called me up immediately. And he's like, "This is Dan Tanberg." And I'm like, "Who's that?" And then he's like, "You wrote me a letter?" I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is great." And we chatted for a while. And he was really surprised to hear from me, but he said he used to hear from people on a regular basis up until about 10 years ago, which I was pretty surprised to hear.
That's
crazy. That's not that long ago to me. And he wrote a type-in program and at least 3 tapes for the 1000, and they were sold by himself. And also, and some of this, I guess I should back up a second. Some of this I learned after the phone call, because on this past Thursday, so like 4 days ago, he sent me an email saying he was having a yard sale, and he came across 5 of his tapes, which he thought were all gone. And so what was it? I guess it was just Friday afternoon. I sent him a text message, and I said, hey, if you're available this weekend, I'd like to come by and pick up those tapes. And he's like, what about now? So 25 minutes later, I was at his house, and he lives right down the street. And well, not as close as Ryan does, but it took me like 10 minutes to get to his house. And we chatted. He was just cleaning up his yard sale, which was going to go on for a couple more days. And we sat in the garage and chatted for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. And he kind of caught me up on what he did back in the early 1980s. He picked himself up a Timex ZX81 kit. And at the time he was, I think he was done. He worked at UNM Hospital until he retired, which is a local hospital. So he and my wife share that in common, because my wife works there as well. And so when he found out that, he kind of opened up and was asking me questions about that. But we had that in common, plus the Timex in common. So it was interesting to hear him talk about, he would work in the ER, come home at night or in the morning, first thing in the morning, program on this Timex 1000, and save his work, go to sleep. And that was something he regularly did, which I find that interesting, because I guess, let's see, he's like 76 now. So he was in his mid-30s at the time. And so he discovered it, you know, I guess when everyone else did, you know, and he had been knowing a little bit about tinkering and soldering. And he still does that kind of stuff to today, because he is into gliders, and he makes his own gliders from scratch, like these big gliders with the wingspans of like, let's say 5 or 6 feet. He was showing me some of them. And he goes out to the local Balloon Fiesta park, because we have like an international balloon fiesta here every October that lasts like 10 days. And he and about 10 other guys a couple of times a month get together and fly their gliders. And I would ask him how they get a glider into the air. And I guess they some of them cheat by using CD, or using motors ripped out of CD-ROM drives to like, and big rubber bands to like launch them in the air. And then once they're up there, they can fly them for like 10 or 15 minutes, just gliding them without the motor. And they use the upgraphs that the Eagles use and Hawks use. I guess they can follow them, and they know how to make them go higher. Pretty interesting story. But getting back to his software, if anyone's been watching the group, I was given 5 tapes by him. And these are, his company was called, let's see, I don't know if anyone can read this. Anyone see any of this? I guess I could take the tape out.
Well, yeah, that will help with the glare. There you go.
Yeah, so I have to put it far away, otherwise I know it'll be blurry. But his company was called, what's that?
Try closer.
Try closer to me?
No, to the lens.
Well, I think it's going to blur.
No, that's fine.
Oh, is it better? Okay.
Yeah, it's this Calliope
good,
software.
good.
Time blasters.
And which is a kind of a auto playing instrument, I think. I don't know. I looked it up. I didn't quite understand what it was, but.
Oh, Calliope?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a musical instrument.
Okay. All right. Well, so he gave me 3 tapes. He gave me this one, Time Blasters. He gave me one called Metagraphics. And again, these are all for the ZX81. And another one called Maze Ball. And it's that's here. And these all came out in like 1982, 1983 era. And what's interesting, let's see which one it is. He also gave me alternate copies. Now, I'm not sure if these have like, because he also had a 2068, which he said he wrote some software for, but I'm not sure. I think this is all software for the 1000. And like this one says, what was it? March 20th, 1983. So I don't know if this is a different version than the one that was I recorded. So I guess I should talk about what I did yesterday. I spent a few hours trying to archive the 2 of the softwares. I used a tape recorder I have, like a shoebox recorder, and I recorded the front and back of Time Blasters, and also the front and back of Metagraphics. And wasn't sure if I should share the WAV files, but David talked me into it, and I'm glad he did, because he already archived the programs, and I tried them out just a few minutes before this meeting, because he shared them with the group last night. And the Time Blasters is like a scrolling game, which I think any graphics you can get out of the 1000 to me is amazing, because like it's such a limited machine. And he does these are 16K programs, so he does have RAM to work with. They're not like written for the 1K machine or the 2K machine, but he does make really clever use of like the simple asterisks and the not question marks, but like the equal sign. And I think at the last meeting I talked about typing in another program called Star Blasters. Yeah. And I typed that in from a magazine called Sync, and we talked about that on Friday evening. And he was talking about how what he felt was the most important part of Star Blasters was the concept he came up with on his own, and he found out later is something like it's part of computer science, where you use different graphics and a quick motion to change and give the eye an optical illusion. And if you, he uses it in both Star Blasters and Time Blasters, if I'm getting these programs correct. And when you fire your laser, instead of just like say a string of like apostrophes or equal signs going across the screen to represent your laser, it sort of first displays dashes and then asterisks and then equal signs, and it does it quite quickly. Not as much so in the type-in program, but I suspect in the program that I tried this morning, the Time Blasters, there must be some machine code in there, because it's much faster. And he did say that he used this book here to learn everything he learned about machine coding on the 1000. And so I kind of picture him coming home from the ER and getting down to business. And he told me he wrote everything by hand in machine language, and then would translate it into the opcodes that were required. So yeah, that's about what I was up to yesterday and the last few days. Anyone have any questions?
Well, so I have a question for Larry, because Larry came up with, he was able to transcribe it into P and TZX files, and I kind of ran into difficulty with that. I was using 81, and I discovered in the process of trying to, archive what you had done, that 81 has this ability to save basic programs in a format that it's B81. I'd never seen it before, but in the program it says that this is a ZX to tape format or something. So it references this script I think Ryan knows about. It's come up on the email list, but Larry came up with P and TZX files, and I'm really curious to know how Larry did that. Yeah.
Is Larry on the meeting? I'm not
yeah,
even sure.
yeah, I see him. Well, looks like he is. I'll see if I can ask him to unmute. Oops.
So can you tell me, David, how you were able to load it? Because I did try messing around because the volume was very low. Did you have to amplify it and normalize it and all that?
So what I did, one of the things that I like about 81 is it has all these little extra windows that you can open, and one of those windows will show you the WAV file, and you can see, like with the 81, the tape format for the 1000 or the 81, bits are encoded as like 4 peaks or 9 peaks, and you can actually see this this thing going on, and you can, like you said, you can amplify the signal and make sure that those peaks are above this red line that 81 uses to indicate a minimum level, I think.
So so in other words, you're saying you can adjust it like kind of like with a cursor and make the line go up and down?
Yeah, it's almost like volume control.
That's cool. I'll have to check this out.
Yeah, sounds like that's a threshold. I think that, like, what's the program, TZX tool or something like that, that you can set the threshold it uses for similar features.
Right. And so, then it's a matter of, are the black bars of the right size? You know, the old the old issue of loading off of tape on an 81 or a 1000 is, do I have thick enough black bars? Because if they're too thin, you know that it's not loading properly, right? I only got one of your wave.
Okay, that's funny that you say that, because Ryan was trying to describe that to me. And I was like, he's like, you just look at the screen and you know if it's working. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about?
No, I mean, you do get it. You after loading it successfully, a certain number of times, you're like, okay, these are thick enough. It's working. I can go off and get my soda and come back, and it'll probably be there. Because a 16K file takes up to 5 minutes to load, which was plenty of time. So yeah, I got them, and I used that interesting little feature, and then I also just did a snapshot, which is another format.
Yeah, I used the .p version to load up the software.
Okay.
So David, I was wondering if because I don't really have all my stuff available easily, would you be able to share a screen and just load up one of the programs, like say Time Blasters?
Well,
and
the problem is that that's on my Windows computer, and this is not on my Windows computer.
I see. Okay.
So I'll do some screen captures, and maybe I'll record a little video and insert it at the end.
Well, I just think that I don't know, maybe not now, but like a useful discussion, and maybe this is part of or an appendix to the documentation we're working on, is kind of a better understanding of all these dang file formats.
I would love to see that, actually.
Yes.
Because I think I know some, but I think I know very little about what really TZX is, and certainly the one that came out of 81 that Adam had, I don't understand what that actually contains, and I don't think the TZX tools did either.
Yeah, I agree. I was having trouble trying to use it with other software. So
I think it's like it can possibly contain. I'm sure it's probably a do-all format, but that a lot of the things don't understand all the other possibilities or something like that.
Yeah.
But either way, it's like it seems that only some, like I know, like is it Zasarix, possibly Fuse? You'll get the thing. You try to use a certain extension, it says, well, that's not really the normal extension you should be using, or something like that.
So a matrix of what file formats versus which emulators it sounds like would be useful, in addition to and what is this format?
Because the and there may need to be shreds within some of those formats, like possibly TZX. That probably a P file is really only an 81 program. I think it's only ever one thing. And that could kind of give you a good idea of, okay, what's mostly compatible, or at least maybe we could boil down recommendations for, like, hey, if you post 81 things in P format, you're good to go pretty much anywhere. Maybe not, but maybe we could come up with something like that. That might be good for the beginner's guide.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can look into doing that. I know a little bit about .tzx versus TAP. .tzx, I believe, can have multiple files inside. It's a virtual tape, so you can have multiple programs.
Oh, but TAP can do that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. TZX, I think, can handle some crazy things, and possibly even digital audio. I don't know, but TAP files are
Ryan,
just digital.
It saves the system status as well, the registers and everything, so it can restore where you're running.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the,
Well, if I can break in here, the TZX is really supposed to be an exceptionally flexible format. It stores information, for instance, for fast loaders that may not use the standard 2068 Spectrum or Timex ZX81 timing for the tapes. So it in its full-blown version, it does a whole lot of stuff that you can't do in a normal TAP format. But by the same token, it's a complex beast that's just a real pain to deal with.
Yeah, but I don't understand. Like, why does it need to store the odd timings? If the TAP file just stores the bytes, and loads the bytes, why would it need to store special timing?
Oh,
Well,
for copyright protected.
Yeah, exactly.
Programs.
The idea behind it was that you could actually play the TZX files back over audio and into your machine.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's okay. So
Which I've done.
it's able to
it works good.
preserve the audio format. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, TZX
If that's
is
your
really
goal.
just
I can look
TZX is
into
really
that
just
for
a
the
compressed audio
documentation.
form.
So I can look at that for the documentation, but I don't think we want to get too deep for a new user guide. So I'll probably just do. Now the problem is we're only going to documentation is only for the 2068. I don't think we're going to touch the .81 or .p formats. I might touch anything that relates to /spectrum/2068. Other formats like the .z80 and .sna. I think a few other words that are available. So I can document those. And the point, like, yeah, don't use those.
Don't use which ones?
Like .z80 or .sna because they're special formats that may not all the engineers may be able to use.
Yeah, I would say that you could make a recommendation that's simple, and then you could say, well, okay, here's what emulators use in case you come across a file you want to use.
Right.
I do like the TZX format best because I use it on the 2068, and I like to use real hardware, and it's so simple to go back and forth between like a WAV file and a TZX file like instantly. And then I can just load it up and wait 25 minutes and be able to load a game. Not literally, it doesn't take that long.
That's what I think the Fuse Utilities has is new tape to wave and that.
Yeah. So David, I did bring up 81 with the time blasters. I kind of want to share my screen, but I'm not sure how to do that. So how do I do that?
At the bottom.
Share screen.
At the bottom. I know, that's what I thought too. Like I have I have a whiteboard, I have apps, reactions. I'm an ignorant person here. I don't see it. But...
Click on okay. It might be if your Zoom window's too small.
I got a green button that says share.
Oh, there we go. You mean that one in the middle, the big one? It's almost hitting me in the head. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna click that, and I'm not sure if it's gonna show my whole window or if just what I have highlighted. But tell me what you guys see. Do you see the 81?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You have to. The next step is selecting the window to share.
Well, I'm in it. Oh, I see. Gosh, there's so many here, and I don't see the.
Right.
There we go. Okay. Tell me if you can see the 81 emulator going now.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see if I can actually. Okay, so you see it says time blasters on the screen and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was surprised to see this game had instructions. And one of the wonderful things is it says touch any key. And of course, what did I touch? The space bar. And I broke out of the program. I was like, well, that's also break. Don't touch the break key.
Yeah, any except that.
Right, exactly. So I'll start a game here in a second. I think it's it tells you the key, so E and F and 7, which is nice because I guess I failed to mention that Dan doesn't have any of his instructions anymore or anything. It's like luck of the draw that I contacted him when I did, because who knows if he would have like kept these tapes after this yard sale. So it's nice that I did that. But I'm gonna try playing the game. I don't know how this will work exactly. Let's see. So that's me. I'm pointing to the screen, but you can't tell. And
it's a nice fire effect.
Yeah, it's cool, right? And
you have to hit those guys, Adam.
Thanks. I think I started it on too high of a level for me. I'm slow. But there's this game, and then I can also load up. Let's see, load snapshot and metagraphics and open. And do you see metagraphics on the screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know how to use this. So earlier when I tried it, I got full screen effect. Yeah, so I think I'm supposed to be able to move around the screen or something.
Yeah, and it should show there's the cursor.
Yeah, I see it now, but without the documentation, I don't know. This is a drawing program of some sort, and I hit something earlier when I was playing it, and I got full screen effect, and it was drawing video art automatically, and I left it running for about 5 minutes, and it did all sorts of cool video art. And now I can't do that. I was going to show you guys. Now you're just looking at a white screen, so not very exciting. So maybe Ryan can go into the code and check it out. Maybe I can break out and look at it.
Yep.
Yeah.
If you press space.
Let's see, I don't have my. let's see. Well, I'm not going to do this live here. Oh, that's something else I wanted to mention. So you can see on the screen here, it says Robotech. And he said that he sold most of his software, he being Dan, he sold his software through this company in, where did he say it was? I think it's actually in the program where it says, but I think they were in Ohio, and they did most of the selling of his programs, and he recorded every single tape separately. So he put in a tape, recorded it from his computer every single time. So he didn't have any mass production or anything like that. And still he says he thinks he sold at between 500 and 1,000 of each tape, which is quite remarkable. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think I'm going to turn off my screen sharing here if I can get back. And let's see.
I seem to remember something used space and then the arrow keys. You held the space and used the arrow keys to draw.
Maybe.
But I don't remember what program
possibly.
that was.
Yeah, I'll look at it. I'm not sharing my screen anymore, right? I turned that off?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully that helped people get an idea.
Hey, quick question for you, Adam. Since you talked about the Albuquerque area.
Yeah.
Have you ever run across Al Fang of Platypus Software?
Oh, he's my next door neighbor. No, I haven't.
He did mostly QL stuff, but he was from Albuquerque.
Al Fang. Okay.
AL, yeah, last name is FENG, Platypus Software.
Platypus Software. Like, is in a duckbill platypus?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And he was active, not fairly. And I just looked him up, and he has a LinkedIn page for Platypus Software. So he's been recent enough.
I'm going to start creeping everyone out if I find all these people in Albuquerque, and they're going to be like, who was this guy contacting me? So.
I mean, he's a QLer, but he might have been involved in 2068 stuff previously too. Most people were.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look at. Well, maybe you can look into him if you see he's in Albuquerque. Let me know about that, because you're a QL person. I don't know anything about that. So,
Alan?
Well, you're local though.
Oh, I am local. It's true enough.
Alan, you were trying to say something about a file format earlier.
Sorry, I didn't hear what happened there. I stepped out for a coffee.
Oh, oh, were you loading a ZX81 program?
Me?
No, you were saying something about a file format earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was earlier. TZX is like a compressed audio format, so it's just recording the distance between pulses.
Oh, interesting.
So it can accurately recreate what was recorded as a digital signal on tape. So that can cover regular tape loading generated by the ROM, or it can cover any kind of custom format, or even formats for other computers that use different pulse lengths.
Cool.
So it's a very low level representation of tape, whereas a tap file is just storing the digital bytes that the computer would load in via the ROM routine. So you can't always store all tapes as a tap file because they have custom loaders, and that's not compatible with that normal ROM loading format.
Right.
So why can't you, if you have the program in the emulator, save it as a tap? I mean, that's the part I don't understand.
Well, because a tap relies on the ROM loading routine, so it has to be able to. So when you have a custom loader, you don't know what the format is of the storage on tape. Like, it's not known. It can be anything. Somebody just invented it.
So when the program itself is loading some other data, because in a custom sense, okay.
Yeah, there's no set format for it. You have to have something generic that can cover all possibilities.
Okay.
I think an example might be Partial Pascal, which actually would load Pascal programs from tape into the compiler outside of the standard load program from Sinclair. So, which is why we can't use Partial Pascal with emulators very well. At least not that I've been able to work out. So we'll have to teach Adam how to do Pascal and get him to try that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, great. Yep. Thanks, Tim.
And we have a manual for it. Larry, can you talk about how you converted Adam's files?
It was actually pretty easy. I just I loaded it into Audacity, amped it, raised the level of it to about 0.6, 0.7. And then I went through and looked at the waveform, see how messed up it was. Most of the time blaster was a bit messed up. And I just amplified the low pulse, triple low pulses, and then ran it through that tape reader program. and create a TZX file, then use the tape utilities file to create the people program.
Okay, you make it sound so easy.
I was just going to say the same exact thing.
It's a while, so it is kind of easy, really. You know, that's a program I'd written about before, that tape reader. Unfortunately, you know, that was, I asked about the code in there. There was something was wrong with the code. I couldn't get why it didn't work. So playing around with that, trial and error, because I don't know programming particularly. So I was able to fix it, and now I'm using it like nobody's business.
Wait, you're able to you had to change the DAT tape reader or the Time Blasters?
Well, the Time Blasters, I just had to fix the file because it was, your volume was really way low.
I know, that's as high as I can get it. I'm aware of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That looks like the output of my ZX81.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my own circuit I built, that real simple circuit, and made it easier. I can change output when I want to save. So, but yeah, you just select all the whole waveform, raise it up, and then kind of spread the waveform out a little bit, you know, with a plus and minus, you know, and find some low spots, either cut and paste a waveform in if it's kind of messed up, or just highlight that area and amplify it. And then
go ahead.
You know, then I move it through that tape reader program, and then you go through it and you search to see if there's any bad spots that it doesn't recognize. You know, it's pretty straightforward. And your tapes wasn't too bad a shape. So, well, side B, I think, of the Time Blasters was better shaped than side A was.
That's what I was going to ask. I was like, did you? Because I presume on both sides it's the same exact program.
Yeah, it was the same program.
Okay.
But there was an extra part on one side of the tape. I think it's it was a Jolly did print a black box in the screen. So I said, nothing. Then it just disappeared. So I said, oh well, I didn't want to wet that one. But just go through that routine, and then I said I've had quite a bit of practice with this, so that's why it sounds so easy. But you know, the DAT tape reader, you do like Control F, and then you put in a question mark, because when it doesn't recognize a waveform, it'll put a question mark. Now, when you look at the question mark waveforms, if it's 4, most of the time it was always just 4 pulses one, the 8 or 9, whatever the other one is. It didn't hardly ever have a problem with those. But you just go in, you go to where the question mark is, you backspace it, put a 0, 1, whatever it is, if it's an actual waveform. Now they'll put question marks for noise pulses that you usually ignore those things. And then you save it, creates that TZX file.
Well, I have a question about my recording that I made. Besides, I know it had low volume. My shoebox recorder has tone control and volume control. So I turned the volume control all the way up, because otherwise I couldn't get anything out. But tone control I put in the middle. Like, that's like the correct way to do it?
Well, probably. I mean, that tone control was an issue. Some people said, you know, I don't know what they used to, you know, say. You look through old articles about that subject, but it worked okay. So the thing I'd suggest, you know, once you get done, bring in Audacity and just hit select all,
right?
Highlight the whole thing, go over the air compression or whatever it's called, and there's one where you can raise the volume level and have at it, and get about 0.6 or 0.7 on the top side. I don't care about the bottom side. So
I tried all that for eventually after I sent it off, but I couldn't get it to work. But I'm going to try it maybe not today, but this week I'm going to try loading on real hardware and checking it out, seeing how it looks.
And then, I loaded in 81, also loaded my real hardware, make sure everything worked fine.
Oh,
I
great.
even loaded in my TZX Duino, my breadboarded Duino.
Oh,
and
awesome.
looked like a champ. It did. Now, the TZX Duino doesn't load as fast as it does like in the 81 if you click on a TZX file, but it's still pretty fast. And it puts this beautiful waveform, perfect load every time, you know.
Great.
So it's in version 1.17, I think it is, of the TZX Duino, using a little Pico.
Yeah.
It's rude and crude. So I said breadboarded, you know, but my display works out, and it's
that looks like the board that Chuck got when he had to do the watch manual. He got that in the mail. I was like, all right, here we go.
I like my 81. My ZX81, I never put it back together. It's always apart.
Oh dear Lord.
Yeah. So I can get at stuff. I mean, that way I can do what I want to do. You know, because my keyboard is from the old days, from the early 80s. It's a big old hunky thing. Here's my keyboard.
Oh my God.
Oh,
look at
yeah.
that. That's a thing of beauty.
Put out by Damco. You know, they had another name. I forgot what they call it now.
I know who you're talking about.
That is sturdy.
Yeah, I looked it back up. I was trying to remember how much I paid for this thing, but what I could find was I bought the case. I don't know if the keyboard was separate. I just bought the case probably because it was still like 40, 50 bucks for the case or something. It was pretty pricey back in the early 80s.
Yeah, those are expensive. I think it was Bud or Hammond cases. That one you have there. They were not cheap.
No, they weren't. And the ASCII keyboard that you could put in it was, I forgot how much that thing was, but I didn't use that one. So I just needed a keyboard, just plain, and then wired it up. And because, typing on a keyboard, Adam, you like typing on that little thing?
I don't like typing on that little thing, but it's, I wanted to get experience doing it because,
it's not too bad. I mean, but it's still tedious. And this keyboard's got some issues, of course. I mean, it's 40 years old. So,
yeah, I actually learned by the end of typing in that program Star Blasters that I almost learned my way around the keyboard without looking.
With having looked up some of the things,
it works.
Well,
that speeds things up. So,
and Adam, that's actually a good point. And I think about this, or I notice it every time I go to type something in on my, on my computer using an emulator, right? None of the keys have any of the labels.
Of course.
And yet, about 80% of the time, I can hit the right key, and it's just muscle memory.
Well, that explains why 20% of your program is wrong.
There you go.
Shots fired.
Wow. So Adam reminded me a few minutes ago that we had about 5 minutes left, and I just wanted to see did anybody else have anything that they wanted to talk about quickly?
I do.
Updates. Oh, go ahead. Yes. Hi, Paul.
Hi. Sorry. Okay, so I'm the one that started the email chain about the Specky and everything else.
Oh, good.
I haven't heard anyone mention it. That's the only thing that worked reasonably well on my computer that I'm using right now. Okay, and yeah, because the other one was just a real puny screen and whatnot. But the only tape file that I had was from HiSoft C, and I think it loaded okay, but it took forever, just like it was a regular tape. Is that normal?
Possibly. Is it a what's the word? WAV file?
No, it was TAP.
TAP. Okay.
That's both normal and not normal. So normally what I have to do, like under the 81 emulator, is I have to turn up the emulator speed to 32x. Otherwise, it does load in real time. I don't know if it's similar on the other emulator.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, some emulators actually have a setting that will do speed loading or do regular loading.
Yeah.
So the emulators have a heuristic built in. For example, for TZX files, they can understand the signal and load it fast instead of just playing the audio. So there is a setting that can say, well, load it the normal way or load it the fast way.
Okay.
So you might want to look for that.
All right. Well, sorry, I was a little late getting in, but is anyone going to do anything with the Specky, or should I force, figure out how to get all these other emulators to work? Because I'm like the only one that's gotten it to work.
Oh, what's your hardware? What are you running?
Well, right now it's just a Windows desktop.
Okay.
81 will support the 2068. You just need to choose the hardware. 81 supports the ZX81, the 1000, the 2068 on Variety. You just got to change the hardware from Spectrum to something else.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because whenever I had the earlier version of Specky 1.5, that really was messed up on the screen.
Okay.
And so I looked 5.9, great, didn't have the 2068, so I copied the ROM from the 1.5 to the 5.9. Works like a champ. So I'm like, okay, now I need to figure out all these dot extensions because I've only ever used the hardware. So that's where I'm at now. I'm like way down in. So whenever someone said like the introductory stuff, yeah, that's where I'm at, even though I've had a Timex, since '82.
Well, just hold on about a week or so. We hopefully have a document for you.
Awesome. Thank you. I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you very much.
You'll be our test case.
Touchdown. Works for me.
I think the other term for that is guinea pig.
Nope, works for me too.
I have one last thing. I don't know if we have time to discuss, not today, but in a future meeting. When Ryan was over here the other night, we were talking about like various Spectrum computers that didn't come out, or really one in particular. And I wasn't too aware of, I guess there was supposed to be a follow-up to the Spectrum, but instead it didn't come out. It was supposed to have Super Basic, and then they put that in the QL. I don't know if we can talk about this more in the group, but I wasn't aware of what he was talking about. Is this like common knowledge to everybody?
Well, so they were just looking at the Sinclair QL forum board. Somebody bought a recent QL that's actually labeled ZX83. So when they were coming up with the Super Spectrum, they called it a ZX83 because it could come out in '83. That eventually morphed into the QL. So now there also was something called the Sam Coupe, done by another company, which was like another Super Spectrum, Spectrum compatible, but had other features.
But did that run the 68K or did that run the Z80, the Sam Coupe?
No, the Sam Coupe was Spectrum compatible, just like the 128 was, all Z80 based. The ZX83 morphed into something else, I think because Sinclair himself wanted the Z80, but people said, oh, come on, Z80's getting old, we got to go. So some of the people really pushed him to 68,000. He didn't like it, but he also wanted to be more of a business machine. That's why the QL was more of a business machine. But then the customer said, business machine, I want to play games, just like on the Spectrum. So there was a lot of reviews of the QL were like, oh, it doesn't play games. Oh my God, why did he do that? So.
Yeah, that's what we talked about. Was I said that I think that they wanted, the customers that they had wanted that follow-on games machine, and Sinclair wanted to go into that business market. And then it would have, if they'd come out with the Super Spectrum, it would have been all about, okay, well, how compatible is it?
And there were some decent games for the QL, some decent video games. So it was a whole different chipset. So you couldn't, it's like saying, gee, why can't my Mac run Apple II programs? They're entirely different hardware configurations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Ask an Apple III.
Well,
I think they were probably talking about the low-key, this person talking about the Super Spectrum. But I think at Sinclair, the Spectrum was really finished with the 48K, which was called the ZX82, because the 128K Spectrum actually started in Spain. It didn't start with Sinclair. So Sinclair eventually moved the 128K Spectrum, or actually I think helped design the machine, but they presented the 128K Spectrum to the UK market after the Spanish 128K was already out. So I don't think they ever seriously considered a follow-on machine to the Spectrum. Now there was something written about the low-key, and that saw some press in 1982 or 83, and that was just somebody at Sinclair scribbling down some possible features for a Spectrum follow-up, but it was never really serious, I don't think.
No, and Clive was never really happy with the Spectrum being a games machine anyway. He always wanted to be in the business market, which is why the QL and the Z88 were his real flagship products that he was pushing later on.
Yeah,
and the Z88 was a great machine.
Yep. His next idea was a business machine, right? His previous ideas were consumer home computers that were inexpensive, and he finished that part, and next part was the business thing. And then the portable machine you're talking about, the Z88, that's correct too. He was at one point talking about using the Z280 instead of the Z80 for a compatible kind of machine, but the Z280 was way delayed by Zilog, so it never came around.
Yeah, and that the 280 was a really powerful processor. I don't know if he could put that into even a relatively low cost business machine.
Yeah.
So two things. We have no guest for next week. So y'all bring all your topics.
And when is the next meeting?
Next meeting is May 1st.
Might not be able to make that one, but yeah.
What you have some sort of May Day events going
well,
on?
I'm going that weekend. I'm going to Texas to attend a Robert E. Howard show called Howard Days. Yeah, we're coming home probably that day, so it's like a 10-hour drive. So it's
okay.
Yeah.
So 9 p.m. Eastern, usual bat time, same bat channel. And I forgot. Oh, the second thing is I want to take a little screen capture because I've got you guys set up in grid view on my screen. So y'all have to look your best for the next minute.
Thanks, Adam.
Good work, Adam.
All right, cool. Thank you. I want to use that on the website in some way. I do have a question for everybody here, and that is, I think that I have, if you ever wrote to a newsletter or a magazine, wrote an article, whatever, I typed your name into a database, and there are like 3,000 names on my website. Literally, if somebody wrote just one letter, I typed that name into the database, right? So Jeff is there. Off the top of my head, Tim is there. Paul, definitely. Greg. This is all off the top of my head. There's a bunch of folks who are there. And what I want to do is, for the folks who are still active, I want to put a little paragraph with your name. And if you don't mind, I'd like to put your picture there too. And somehow flag that so that when you go to the website, and there's a page just for the list of people. When you get to the page of just for people, folks who are not yet coming to the meetings can see, oh yeah, there is a community of, folks who are still active. And as it turns out, we're all over 50.
I am 50, just plain 50.
Right, 50 or older. I won't put your name on. I won't put your
50,
age on there.
You're over 50.
He can be 50 in one
That's
day
true.
and qualify as
Good
over.
enough. True enough.
Adam's the baby of the group.
So
close, very close.
I'm going to reach out to each of you individually for give me a little teaser. So start thinking about what you would want to say about yourself in about 2 paragraphs, and start looking around for that really good picture of yourself.
Hopefully from that period of time too, from the early 80s, maybe, right?
That's a good idea. We could do both. We could
or
do
both. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Before and after shot.
It's exactly right. Before and after. That's right.
This is what the computer made me look like.
Low
this
and
is
high
what a Sinclair
mileage
does to you. Okay, so those are my announcements. Does anything we want to chat about for a couple minutes before we call it a day?
I have one tiny little thing that won't take long. So
Okay.
I reached out to WASD Keyboards. They were gonna UV print some keycaps for me.
Yeah.
But it turns out that they can't do what I want on a black key, which really bummed me out. It would have to be a white key. And other people have done that, right? They've done them on like a white or a cream colored key. And I don't know. I feel like it needs to be a black key, and it still needs to have that white field on the top, for the ZX81 type key, right? And for the TS1000. So I'm back to the drawing board on that. I mean, right now, the only thing I really have that I'm happy with is my decal prototype, the water slide decals, but that's just not a production ready way to do it. And it probably won't hold up with any kind of wear and tear. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. And I even talk to people that do the double shot, but with double shot, you can't get that complex geometry on the key. I'm almost thinking of like maybe casting a two-part key, right? So that you've got a middle white field and then the black on the outside, which means each keycap would have to be cast in 2 stages, but then you could UV print on the top and you would have a good key. So that's where my head is right now. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And as soon as I have something, I'll be showing that.
Ingo, I saw a video or webpage about a homemade. Gosh, I wish I could remember what it was. It'll come back to me. I'll email you about it. But it was this homemade key press thing. It involved heat. It involved some kind of
dye sublimation.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of people do that, and yeah, you can buy these dye sublimation inks, and then you use like one of those hair press irons with like some rubber to get that contour. Yeah. And you can use a regular inkjet printer. It's just you could have never used that printer for anything but dye sublimation ink, and you can print out stuff, and then it heat transfers this ink into the plastic so that it's fairly permanent. It's and so yeah, that would be another option, but still I would, if to get a black keycap so the skirt's black and just have like a white face, right? I would have to do a double molding process or something.
Yeah, I didn't. What is it that the process they do for the so-called pudding keycaps?
I'm out of here, guys.
Thank you, Adam.
All right, bye. See you, Adam.
Bye, Adam.
The pudding ones, the squishy soft ones.
Well, I don't know, but they have like as I recall, I just saw them a little bit. Don't they have like a dark top and a light colored side? There must be some process where they do 2 colorings.
I think
make those.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, look into pudding keycaps. Yeah, unfortunately, the like you said, Ingo, the white on black is not super easy to do. But look at what Memotech did with their custom keyboard, especially the blue one. That might be black on blue. I can't recall off the top of my head, but yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chuck.
Good seeing everybody.
Yeah, that was awesome. We'll see you on the 1st.